Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking at something that I think you're really going to enjoy. We've all been there, right? Scrolling endlessly through recommendations that just completely miss the mark. It's like these algorithms just don't get us at all.
Mm.
But what if there was a way to make them truly understand our preferences? Like really get what we love and what we'd rather avoid? Well, that's what we're diving into today with this new research paper.
Yeah, this paper's called Preference Discerning with LLM Enhanced Generative Retrieval, and it's hot off the press from the folks over at Meta AI. Just came out this month, actually.
And what makes this paper so intriguing is that it's not just about making recommendations a bit better, you know?
Yeah.
It's proposing a whole new way of thinking about personalization.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of just guessing what we might like based on, past clicks and ratings, this new approach is all about explicitly telling the AI what we want. More of this, less of that. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
So instead of just relying on what they call implicit feedback, which is basically just observing your actions, they're looking at how to incorporate explicit preferences. Actually telling the system what you like and dislike.
I mean, think about it. Like imagine being able to say to your streaming service, I love documentaries about nature, but I absolutely can't stand anything about spiders.
And then actually having that shape your recommendations. That's the kind of control we're talking about here.
I can already see the possibilities. It's like finally having a say in what the AI throws my way. So how do they actually do this?
Yeah.
How do they actually make the AI understand our preferences? In a way it can actually use.
Well, they break it down into two main parts. The first part is called preference approximation, and this is where those big, powerful language models, the LLMs, come in.
Yes, the LLM's always got to make an appearance, right?
Well, they're pretty good at what they do. In this case, they take things like your past reviews, what you've watched, listened to, whatever, and even details about the items themselves. And they use all that data to basically generate a textual representation of your preferences.
So it's like they're translating our likes and dislikes into a language the AI can actually understand and work with.
Exactly. And then once they have this kind of AI-readable profile of your tastes, that leads to the second part, preference conditioning.
Okay, so now we've got the AI speaking our language, or at least understanding it. What happens next?
This is where they actually design a recommendation system that can take these textual preferences and actually do something with them.
So it's not just about filtering out stuff we don't like. It's about actually generating new recommendations that are tailored to our unique tastes.
And that's where they introduced this new method called Mender, which stands for Multimodal Preference Discerner.
Mender, huh?
Mm-hmm.
That's a pretty catchy name. So what's so special about Mender? How does it actually work?
It basically combines the power of those pre-trained language models we were talking about with something called generative retrieval techniques. And this allows it to go beyond just ranking existing items and actually generate new recommendations that you might never have even considered before.
So it's like expanding the possibilities, right?
Yeah.
Instead of just choosing from a preset list, it can pull from a much wider pool of options.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. But of course, the big question is, does it actually work? Do they actually put this Mender model to the test?
Oh, yeah. They put it through its paces. They designed this whole new benchmark specifically to evaluate how well this preference discerning idea actually performs in the real world.
Rigorous testing, always a good sign.
Yeah.
So tell me, what did they discover? Did this new approach live up to the hype?
One of the key things they looked at was something called sentiment following. Basically, how well the AI picks up on what you don't like based on your stated preferences.
So not just what we love, but also what we really don't want to see. That seems pretty crucial for a truly personalized experience.
Right. And they also looked at something called fine-grained steering, which is basically how accurately the AI can recommend items that are very similar to your expressed preferences.
Like if I say I love historical fiction set in ancient Egypt, it should be able to suggest books that fit that very specific niche.
Exactly. And the results were, well, they were pretty impressive.
All right, spill the beans. Did this Mender model, with its preference discerning powers, deliver the goods or not?
We can get into those results right now, actually.
Let's hear it. Then tell us, did this new approach really shake up the world of recommendations?
So they found that Mender, with this whole preference discerning thing, consistently outperformed those traditional recommendation models across a bunch of different data sets.
Okay, so it's actually working. That's great to hear. What kind of data sets are we talking about here?
Well, they tested it out on some Amazon review data sets, stuff from beauty sports and outdoors, toys and games.
Interesting. So pretty diverse range of products there. What about beyond Amazon? Do they try it on anything else?
Yeah. They also use a data set from Steam, the gaming platform.
Makes sense. So they really wanted to cover their bases and see how it performed across different types of recommendations. Makes sense. So how do they actually measure how well the model was doing?
They use those standard information retrieval metrics, like recall, which
Mm.
basically measures how many relevant items the AI was able to recommend. And then there's NDCG, which takes into account both relevance and the order of the
Oh,
recommendations.
so it's not just about finding the right stuff. It's about making sure the best recommendations are right there at the top where you're most likely to see them. No more endless scrolling. That's a win in my book.
Yeah.
So what else did they find?
Well, on those Amazon data sets, Mender actually developed that fine-grained steering ability we talked about before, recommending things that are very similar to your stated preferences.
Right.
And it did this all naturally just from being trained on those preference-based recommendations.
Wow. So it's like the AI is learning to understand those subtle nuances in our tastes just by being exposed to more explicit preference data. That's pretty impressive. What about the Steam data set? Did they see the same thing there?
Not quite as much fine-grained steering there.
Huh. That's interesting. Any idea what that might be?
They think it might have something to do with the differences in the data itself. The Steam data set is way bigger, and the patterns of item popularity are different compared to those Amazon subsets. So those factors might have influenced how well that particular capability emerged.
So the data itself plays a role in shaping what the AI learns. That's an important point to keep in mind. What about understanding what users dislike? Did they see any progress there? That whole sentiment following thing.
Yeah, so overall sentiment following was a bit trickier for the AI to grasp, but they found that if they specifically trained it on examples where the goal was to avoid certain items, based on that negative sentiment, they could significantly improve Mender's performance in that area.
So even though recognizing what we don't like is still a work in progress for these AI systems, targeted training can help them get better at it. That's good news. So it seems like this preference discerning approach has a lot of potential, but are there any limitations or challenges they encountered?
Yeah, they did point out a couple of things. One is that the whole preference generation process, where the LLMs come in, that's still pretty computationally expensive. It takes a lot of processing power and fine-tuning to get it right.
So scaling this up for wider use could be a hurdle.
Right. And they also acknowledge that their research was limited to those 4 data sets we talked about. So more research is needed to see how well this approach generalizes to other domains and types of recommendations.
Okay, so it's still early days, but the results so far are definitely promising.
Definitely. And they highlighted a few areas where further research is needed.
Like what?
Well, for example, they pointed out the need to explore the impact of using even larger, more powerful language models in this whole preference discerning pipeline.
Makes sense. I mean, those LLMs are constantly evolving, so who knows what kind of capabilities we might unlock with even more advanced models.
Exactly. It's an exciting area with a lot of potential for future development. So while this research is a significant step forward in personalized recommendations, there's still much more to discover.
Ooh. We've covered a lot of ground today, from the limitations of those traditional recommendation systems to the potential of this whole preference discerning approach and all the capabilities it brings to the table. But let's bring it back to our listeners. What does all this mean for our listeners, the ones who are out there every day battling those frustrating recommendation algorithms? What are the key takeaways for them?
I think the biggest takeaway is that we're moving away from these systems that just, make assumptions about what we want and moving towards systems that can actually understand and respond to our preferences, when we clearly tell them what we like and don't like.
It's about having more control over those recommendations, right? Instead of feeling like we're at the mercy of some black box algorithm.
Exactly. And this research shows that it's not just some, pie in the sky idea. It's actually something that can work in practice.
And when you start to think about the broader applications of this technology, it gets really exciting. Imagine a shopping app that can actually help you discover products you might love, even if they're from brands you've never heard of before.
Or a learning platform that can curate content that's specifically tailored to your interests and goals.
And of course, we can't forget about entertainment. Imagine streaming services that can recommend movies and shows that are actually in line with your tastes. Yeah. No more endless scrolling trying to find something to watch.
It's really a glimpse into a future where AI can understand and cater to our individual preferences, which is, pretty amazing when you think about it.
It definitely is. And for our listeners who want to dig a little deeper into the technical details of this research, we've got a link to the full paper in our show notes, so be sure to check that out if you're curious.
And until next time, keep exploring those cutting-edge AI advancements.
And we'll be back soon with another deep dive into the world of AI. See you then.